Welcome to the Nightlife Podcast. Have you ever dismissed a dream as just the pizza or stress from the day? More often than we realize, the symbols and stories in our dreams contain divine revelation hidden for us to discover. Once you realize this gift that's been yours all along, you'll never go back to spending the nightlife just sleeping. Since it's Thanksgiving week, I'm officially dedicating this episode to all the turkeys out there. Of course, I'm not calling you a turkey, but some of those you may be flocking together with for a Thanksgiving meal. Have you ever tried self-diagnosing car troubles? This just happened to me last week. I had driven somewhere, and when I got back into my car to leave, it wouldn't start. I tried several different tricks with the key fob, then locking, unlocking, and restarting several times, rummaged around looking for jumper cables. I got the hood up, called my husband, who was quite far away, then my daughter. After about 10 minutes of troubleshooting, I realized the problem. I had turned off my car without putting it into park. Oopsies. Within a short time, I got my car started and canceled my daughter's rescue mission. On my way home, I reflected on what state of mind I was in that morning. It was shocking to me that I had been so distracted that decades of muscle memory putting my vehicle into park before turning it off had failed. I think that temporary breakdown made me realize that some mental emotional stress I've got going on right now is taking more of a toll than I realized. This mishap served as a proverbial check engine light to take a closer look at how I'm really doing. There are times we know when something isn't working well in our life and what to do about it. For instance, I've been feeling increasingly rushed in the mornings, so just this week I rolled back my wake-up time to give myself more margin, and that simple solution brought immense peace back into the start of my days. In many cases, however, we only know there's a problem and could use help identifying root causes that aren't evident at all. Have you ever found yourself noticing red flags in yours or someone else's physical, mental, or emotional health, a relationship, job, or other sphere of life? If you're like me, you may recall times where you disregarded warning signs, then later regretted not paying attention sooner. Proverbs 22:3 says, "The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty." There's a certain category of dream that I've grown to embrace called diagnostic dreams. At first glance, these can seem confusing or annoying. Our brains just processing stress or random information because they typically contain imagery from our waking lives. But these dreams are often spotlighting issues in or around our lives that need attention or illuminating deeper places to help us see how we're really doing emotionally, relationally, spiritually, or otherwise. Have you ever had a dream where you're so tired you can't open your eyes, can't move, or you're fighting and can barely throw a punch? In the midst of an extremely taxing season, I kept having dreams of being in a hospital, urgently pinpointing that I was approaching burnout and showing that I needed to prioritize my personal health and rest immediately. Have you ever had a broken down vehicle dream? What about your phone or computer not working? A flood or fire in your house, church, or workplace? Being naked, chased, or everything going wrong? I've had hundreds of significant diagnostic dreams through the years, most having to do with very practical aspects of my life that need healing, deliverance, or recalibration. Several have already found their way into podcast episodes, and many more will be woven into future ones. One of my favorite and most popular episodes is a subcategory of diagnostic dreams, which I called people in relationship dreams. I received so many of these and already have a sequel in the works. Here's an example of a diagnostic relationship dream. One listener had a disturbing dream that someone she knew asked her, "What is wife abuse?" then showed her the top of her head, which was crushed in where her husband had been hitting her with a frying pan over and over again. Since non-physical abuse is harder to see, this picture brought powerful clarity to the harm caused by repetitive patterns of verbal abuse as a call to immediate attention and action. This revelation was life-changing for the woman concerned, who engaged with the message from the dream by learning how to advocate for herself and establishing firm boundaries in her marriage. Often dreams will illuminate things we need to see in different spheres of our lives, such as church, family, or work. I previously shared a dream about a church I attended. The stage was dark. There were candles, a pentagram, and satanic relics on the stage, and the pastor was talking in a creepy voice that wasn't his own. These startling images diagnosed the total spiritual corruption that had taken hold, giving me strong direction against any affiliation there. Kevin dreamed that his church was a dirty wave pool that hadn't been cleaned in a long time. While there were good things happening at his church, he knew that personal sin among some of the leaders was being downplayed. The illustration was that deep cleansing was needed, or soon this church would be unfit for ministry. He also came to see the urgency of an entire congregation at risk for spiritual infection. Confirming what Kevin already sensed, this dream gave him clarity and courage to address their lead pastor with his concerns. It's admirable that Kevin answered God's call to be a watchman over his church. Even though he was not in any position of leadership, he could have declined to take action since the situations didn't involve him directly. Or he may have been tempted to assume that God would speak to the leaders themselves, or through others in higher positions of influence than he. Yet so often, we see God using ordinary people who will give him their yes to speak and act at his direction. People like you and me are the agents through which Jesus' "on earth as it is in heaven" prayer is fulfilled. Several years ago, Linda dreamed she arrived at her workplace and everything was subpoenaed. Many employees were being arrested, and she would need new work clothes to continue working there. Amazingly, this came just as her company had come under new ownership, and it soon became apparent that the new owners were engaged in illegal financial activity, which affected every aspect of their company, as Linda had seen in her dream. Being a long-term employee, she was so thankful how seeing this ahead of time in her dream had kept her from being caught off guard. Earlier this year, Kelly had a dream that diagnosed where her startup business was at. In the dream, her business coach gave her a postcard with a developing picture of Thomas the train. As she was walking along looking at the postcard, she realized she was in line to get onto a big old sailboat. As Kelly was stepping onto the sailboat, she slipped and fell and was hanging onto the side of the boat. She felt afraid she was going to fall when suddenly the boat lurched to the side, shooting her high up into the air. As she was falling back down, she saw that her sister, Sophia, was falling too, and began assuring her that they were going to be okay. She was praying and thanking Jesus for saving them, and sending protecting angels to slow them down as they were falling. Right before they hit the water, they did slow down, yet somehow their heads never went underwater. They were able to swim to the beach and were completely fine. This dream came at a critical time when Kelly was reevaluating how much debt to take on in this new venture. The Thomas the Train picture from her business coach seemed to illustrate that her business was in a very young stage, and that if she just kept going, with determination she would reach her goals for success. The slow and steady progress of a child's train is a contrast to the big old boat she was attempting to get onto. If you think about traveling by sailboat, there are many more variables than by train, as they're susceptible to waves, wind, and storms, and require constant course correction. The failure getting onto the ship, being tossed extremely high and then plunging down, directly correlated to her taking on debt with hopes for accelerated growth, only to be plunged into disappointment and danger of going under when profits weren't covering her expenses. Her sister's name, Sophia, means wisdom, which is another name for the Holy Spirit. So this was a powerful illustration that Kelly is never alone, especially in times of trouble. Highlighting her deep faith in God, she felt assured that even through failure, her finances would not go under, and she would make it safely to shore. The timing of this dream was very impactful and prompted an immediate financial reevaluation with her husband, ultimately leading to a change of her business model that kept them from going deeper into debt. Kelly and her husband's decision to heed what this dream was showing them exemplifies the posture of humility and openness to God's counsel in their lives. I've had to learn over time to treasure God's wisdom in my life, even when it's not what I want to hear. Proverbs 4 says, "Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and in all you're getting, get understanding. Exalt her, and she will promote you. She will bring you honor when you embrace her. She will place on your head an ornament of grace, a crown of glory she will deliver to you." In a busy season of motherhood and homeschooling, where I felt constantly at the point of being overwhelmed, I was really striving to implement better systems and routines to manage all that had to be done. One night, I had a dream about being surrounded by demons, hindering me in many small ways throughout every day. The dream contained a message that my progress is dependent on leadership and authority, not mere effort. This diagnosis shifted my focus to the spiritual forces trying to distract and exhaust me, and ultimately empowered me to level up in that season in significant ways. Here's a dream that Joy shared in a dream interpretation class in Boise last summer.
Several years ago, I had a dream where I was coming down the elevator in a really nice hotel. And I remember reflecting on the elevator how good I felt and that I hadn't felt as much me in a really, really long time. As I stepped off the elevator, I was in this beautiful hotel lobby and I was greeted by a small white dog that was very happy to see me, and I could tell that it wanted me to follow it. And so as I was following it outside of the lobby, I was going through the hallways into a really nice manicured courtyard. And I was seeing Pepperdine University and an old friend of mine, which was currently estranged, but her name was Linda, and she was the sponsor for Pepperdine University. And I could see that the function that was happening in the courtyard was for the university. And I saw that friend of mine standing there in a large group of people, and I noticed that I felt happy to see her. I felt compassion, and I went up to the group to speak with her. And it was at that point she saw me, she turned, and it became very ugly. And not only her, but the entire group started yelling at me. And I turned and started to run and felt that I was being chased by this group of people. And I was very quickly out of the courtyard and in this large abandoned parking lot where there was only one car, and it was in the far corner. And I knew that that car was mine. And I was so disappointed because it was like a beige, rusty Pinto. But I was running for it as fast as I could. I got in it and was locking all four of the doors so that no one could get me. And as I did that, white paint by angels or some beings that were there to help me covered over the car. And then I woke up.
This dream came during a transition in Joy's life, pictured through the hotel and the elevator. The context of the university and landscaping directly related to literal business dealings she had going on in Southern California at that time. The diagnostic message in the dream was that the opportunities she was facing were not what they seemed because of the people involved. While they seemed good and wise, in reality they were not for her, and their betrayal would lead her into disappointment and financial loss. Even though it was hard to pass up a situation that looked promising, God showed her that He was covering her in that season of her life, posturing her in hope for the next chapter of her story yet to be revealed. What a gift! When diagnostic dreams involve other people, we need clarity about whether to share the message we're receiving or just pray on their behalf. Here's a diagnostic dream I had concerning a friend a few months ago. In this dream, I was just observing, so this was a rare type of dream with a message for her, since only she could know what it was pointing to in her life. I prayed through what this dream was revealing and knew that the rest would be between her and God. In my dream, my friend was wearing a beautiful gown that was a costume, and she owned a nice big Walmart that had a broken sink at the front of the store. She told me she had tried to find someone to fix it, but no one could, so it had just been sitting there out of service, waiting for repairs for a long time. She said she kept smelling skunk and that she believed it had something to do with the broken sink. I encouraged her to keep searching for a repairman because one is bound to have the knowledge and experience needed for her particular situation. You can probably identify that the main theme of this dream is the broken sink, something that's been broken for a long time that my friend has given up hope on. A sink can represent the heart's ability to flush away, cleanse, or deal with emotional pain. The broken sink likely illustrates long-term heart issues that she hasn't been able to find healing for. At some point, she gave up trying and has just learned to navigate around the pain, focusing on the abundance of other things vying for her attention in the store of her life. The skunk smell demonstrates discernment from God. She can sense that something putrid and highly offensive is lurking around. Yet, she still hasn't been able to zero in on what it is and what specific ways it's affecting her personally. Walmart correlates to a life of quantity, but lacking in quality. Wearing a costume can represent pretending, being stuck in a role or appearance that's not truly who we are or what we want. These were my impressions from the dream that I presented to her. God has blessed her with abundant resources, capacity, and influence. But in some ways, she feels stuck in roles that she didn't choose. Perhaps she feels pressure to appear to be flourishing on the outside, managing all of the good and productive activity in her life without space to acknowledge pain she feels caused by the actions of others, and lacking deep, meaningful connection and relationships that she truly desires. It seems God is inviting her to come to Him as the one who can heal what is broken, that no human wisdom has been able to help her with, and that God has already begun showing her where to look. Can you relate to any of the diagnoses in this dream in any seasons of your own life? Feeling stuck in roles you didn't choose? Pretending to keep up a false image? Being forced to manage quantity at the expense of quality of life or relationships you long for? Living with a broken heart that you've given up on seeking healing for? Avoiding dysfunction by staying busy? Or discerning something is wrong in the stinkiest way, but not knowing what it is? I can relate to all of these, and I'm sure many of you can as well. Even though our lives look different in the details, we are all living through variations of the same fundamental human experiences that have existed since the beginning of time. The same Holy Spirit who created the world and has interacted with humans throughout history is constantly inviting us into the higher realm of what He sees, what He knows, and how He thinks. Ultimately, we were created to live in partnership with Him in every aspect of our lives. Hebrews 5:14 says, "Solid food belongs to those who are of full age, that is, to those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil." Cultivating discernment is a process we are all constantly growing in. When we engage with dreams from God, we're accepting the invitation to seek Him for the treasures of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom He has hidden for us, the great and mighty things we do not know, as the prophet Jeremiah spoke of. The divine intel we receive in our dreams can powerfully shape our perspectives and impact the very practical aspects of our daily lives. Thanks so much to those who have shared dreams for today's episode. This podcast is a collaboration and couldn't exist without you. If you have dreams to contribute or that you need help interpreting, please reach out to me using the contact button on my website at www.thenightlife-podcast.com. Also, let me know if you have comments or suggestions for future episodes, or if you're interested in being interviewed on the show. During this week of Thanksgiving, I sense an invitation for each of us to plunge more deeply into the abundance of God. I love how Psalm 42:7 describes this. Deep calls to deep in the roar of your waterfalls. All your waves and breakers have swept over me. As we embrace a lifestyle of joyful pursuit, the light of Jesus we bring to the world around us will reach farther and wider than we can imagine. In closing, I'm praying Paul's prayer from Romans 15 for each of us now, that the God of hope will fill us with all joy and peace as we trust in Him, so that we may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. Thanks so much for listening.